Oh my god, Balanced Druid has been nerfed into the ground and Fire Mage is back into the meta, and is that enough to make a spec fun? Well, welcome back to Marcelian&Flame. I am Flame and I will be talking about the most fun ranged DPS to the least fun ranged DPS and ranking them all together in a nice, juicy to look at tier list. And we're going to talk about damage a little bit. That is a little bit important, but most of all, playstyle, fun, talent variety. And we are starting off with Balanced Druid. I think this is a good opportunity to talk about the tier sets and how this can affect the overall ranking in terms of obviously performance, but also in terms of fun. Balanced Druid tier set, particularly the Keeper of the Grove, because that's been like the new cool thing right now, is really fun. It's really fun to have those insane star surges just do crazy amounts of damage. The concept of the tier set where you pop your Celestial Alignment, you do as much damage in the Dryad window as possible because it spawns your Dryad, and then that damage buffs your star surges at the end of your Dryad window is really cool. It gives you like an extra little flavor and stuff to do. In your rotation, you have to think a little bit about it more. Maybe you pull a little bit more Astral Power. Maybe you use your individual globals to their maximum effectiveness, put as much damage in as possible, and then you burst those fat Giga star surges. Well, they used to be fat, they're still fat. I mean, I'm critting for 40 to 50 million on plus 12s on the PTR with how die level gets scaled, so that is quite a lot. However, even with that, Balanced Druid damage has been tuned really low because the tier sets are a huge portion of your overall performance. Now, what that means in terms of fun is that without the tier set, you're going to suck real hard unless the tier sets get nerfed a lot, and then the class gets buffed a lot to compensate for that fact. So it depends, because this will make you feel different coming from one tier set to another, losing the power from the Undermine tier set and getting the new Koresh tier set, or Mana Forge tier set rather. So that depends. Other than that, Balanced Druid is just fun all the time. I'm gonna put it into S tier since Marcelian's not here to complain, because it makes simple specs fun and actually really good. It has almost no RNG. It's very predictable. It's very satisfying to spend your resources and not have to overcap any of them. And if you like this video and you're excited for 11.2, consider checking our Patreon page, since Patreon support everything that we do here on Marcelian&Flame, and we have a bunch of goodies ready for you guys a lot earlier. We are working right now on some UI improvements. For instance, Marcelian has, I think, finished the player profile for 11.2 with all the dungeons and the raid changes with your bars to actually show what you need to see in game. And I'm almost done with my weak auras for all of the classes, because if you have seen any of the footage on our videos and you look at that personal resource display, looks kind of nice. I wonder why mine doesn't look like that. That's because that's not personal resource display. It is a weak aura specifically designed to look exactly like the personal resource display, because that's how I wanted it to be. And all of that will have early access for Patreons. You don't have to pay for anything. Of course, this will be probably available for everybody at the release of the patch. But until then, until everything is up and ready, Patrons have exclusive access to them, have exclusive feedback channels for us that we can, address them and make modifications based off of what they requested and so on and so forth. So patreon.com/Marcelian&Flame, you'll be supporting the content. We're going to have a lot of cool things for you to see on the channel in the upcoming weeks. So thank you very much for the support and consideration. And we're gonna look at augmentation. Dude, okay. You've known the history of Marcelian&Flame and the Evoker class. I'm gonna put it right here because I have kind of started to really like Evokers, particularly Augmentation, now that it's more of a DPS rather than a support. Or at least that now the feedback of me doing really well is not as abstract and reliant so much on other people. I feel like the spells that I individually press are a lot more impactful. Plus, I love being a dragon, even though that this dragon kind of looks like a little salamander gecko. It's still really fun to breathe fire and flap your wings and fly all over the place. And that's where I'm going to be putting Evoker and, well, by Evoker, Augmentation. And I'm going to be putting Devastation actually fairly close there as well. I just miss the simplistic things being a dragon. If the devs could actually give us a Draconid form or an actual thing that you hear us say every time that we make one of these videos, this would be an easy S+ here to me. I love the playstyle, I love the feeling, I love the fantasy of being a big dragon. everything about it except the looks. And we all know that when it comes to fun, looks are kind of important. Transmogs make up for your 50% of your DPS. Everybody knows that. And not looking cool and awesome and epic just is a big minus. It's a big minus. All right. Moving to Beast Mastery. This is interesting because Beast Mastery is on the cusp of either something great or something incredibly disappointing. The pack leader tier set gives you Stampede. It is passive, but it is Stampede. Since they took actually Stampede away from Hunter, since they couldn't actually balance it enough to be a proper cooldown for years, it was a dead ability. And I don't know about other Hunters, I personally have been wanting Stampede for a very long time, and the tier set is looking like the only way that we're gonna get Stampede. Similar to other tier sets, it is a ridiculously amount of power from what the class normally does, and it's not normally supposed to do this much damage. And I am not in favor of passive procs being the major source of your damage, since the tier set just plays itself for you. But the concept and the theme of it is really there. I like what they're doing with the talents being shuffled around. I'm hoping that one day I can still use Barrage and just do crazy stuff. But outside of that, Beast Mastery is just fun. It's fun to have a gazillion beasts just roam around and charge enemies. Just from the sheer visual of it, it's all the way up here. Because otherwise the playstyle is just more of the same. It's a little bit passive, it's a little bit boring. Marksmanship is something that I don't know how to approach, because Dark Ranger was looking like it was going to be something really fun and cool and like a change from the norm. And Dark Ranger, for instance, for Beast Mastery is like way better, way more fun than it is for Marksmanship. However, Marksmanship doesn't, it actually fulfills the fantasy. So where certain talents kind of work better for Beast Mastery, the base kit of Marksmanship is a little bit ahead of Beast Mastery, so they kind of both equal each other out in around A tier. Marksmanship just feels like Marksmanship. It's great that we now have Lock and Load a little bit closer to the beginning of the talent tree. It's my favorite talent for Marksmanship. It has been that way since BFA. So I love the fact that it's there. I am still not convinced with the capstones. I really want Dark Ranger to be really good because it's so cool and fun. And if that ends up being, I wouldn't say the best build, but at least competitive with Sentinel in both AoE and single target, Marksmanship could easily jump like 2 tiers for me in terms of like awesomeness. I think at this point, you guys probably know that I am the biggest simp for Mage, particularly Arcane and Fire, and we're gonna get to Fire as well. Unfortunately, Arcane, over the course of the War Within, has had the least amount of talent variety and flexibility out of all the specs in the game. It has been one of the most set in stone specs, period, and that's like a big minus for me. Despite that, the gameplay is really cool. And I know that a lot of people consider Arcane to be a little bit complex, and now it seems like we're at an age where people want more and more specs to be simple, just like Red, and I would hope that that doesn't happen. Not because I don't want specs to be simple, I think simple is better, but the way that Red is doing simple is not something that I personally enjoy. So I relish in the fact that Arcane provides a little bit more depth, a little bit more process of thinking when it comes to the rotation, where my decision can matter a little bit more, and if I practice and know the spec more, I can, you know, make a difference against an Arcane that just picks up the spec and just presses the shiny buttons. So that's really cool. And the changes that are happening to Season 3 kind of makes it seem like Arcane has more than one build available. Right now on the PTR, there are like 2 main builds that you play. There's the old school high voltage build, which is always really fun, or the late drinker build, which sacrifices a little bit of AoE for a lot more single target. Now, I don't know how these are still balanced, because from week to week things change, but if they do become competitive enough, having 2 different builds for M+ sounds really cool, and it's something that Arcane has been needing, which is talent variety. Fire Mage is S+, although it is risky. It's at the risk of dropping down at least 1 tier because of Frostfire Fire Mage. Bro, I just cannot wrap my head around Frostfire and why does it need to be so slow, why it feels so clunky. It has some of the issues that Survival has, where you're going to over-generate certain procs because you just don't have enough Phoenix Flames to consume your excess Frost. That was in Season 1, being able to do that has been the most fun I've ever had on a spec in in general, period, because it felt like I always had a tool, I always had a proc, I always had something to do, even outside cooldowns. I can just speed up the recovery rate of my cooldowns, and that was really fun, and that felt like what Fire Mage would actually end up doing. I don't know if Frostfire is going to evolve anymore, but Sun Fury is picking up, and I've seen some Sun Furies on the PTR absolutely demolish the meters, and I love it when Flame Strikes and Pyroblasts actually do a lot of damage, and you actually really want to press them outside of just having Ignite be your best thing. I'm not opposed to Ignite, but speaking of what Arcane had, having the option to play Ignite builds, Pyroblast builds, Flame Strike builds, and Living Bomb builds, and kind of swapping in between, changing things, putting a Meteor in, that's just really cool for me. Frost Mage has kind of been decently fun for me. It's not quite there yet. I feel like Frost Mage needs a little bit more depth. I feel like Frost Mage kind of needs the Frost Decay treatment, where from a bland, simple spec that has been playing the exact same playstyles for years, it needs a little bit of an update. Granted, Frostfire Frost Mage is actually really cool, and if you have to play with Death's Chill, which is something that I've tested on the PTR, having to juggle the Death's Chill stacks is actually really nice. It gives you like an extra thing to do, and it feels a little bit more complex, but not complicated in any way. I'm not sure if that will end up being the playstyle for Frost Mage, and outside of that, it doesn't really do anything new, anything different, anything exciting. So at least it's an A+, because Mage does a lot of heavy lifting for Frost as a class. Shadow Priest, I'm gonna have to put it with probably Balanced Druid. The rework actually did something that I've been asking for Shadow Priest since early Dragonflight. Mind Spike is finally gone, and we talked about this in our Shadow Priest rework video, which you can see on our channel. And the capstones have been kind of reworked. Now, this rework is better in the sense that it feels like the capstones kind of function better now, period. However, they are all passives. This is like the one drawback that Shadow Priest still has. Well, two drawbacks. This and the fact that Mind Seer is still not yet back. I'm tired, and I would get bored of having to use Psychic Link to always do AoE damage. It's boring. However, Shadow Crash having 2 charges is incredibly fun and a much bigger improvement on the quality of life when it comes to how you're approaching Mythic plus AoE packs. And the fact, I don't know when this was changed, but last time I really gave Shadow Priest a serious thought was when Shadow Crash was still bugged and it wouldn't smart apply your dots. So you had a chance of, like, if you already had Vampiric Touch on a couple of mobs and you Shadow Crash the pack, those mobs would have their Vampiric Touch refreshed instead of having Shadow Crash apply Vampiric Touch to mobs that did not already have your dots. But now that doesn't seem to be the case. Now it seems to be applying in a smart way, and you can use both of your Shadow Crash charges to apply a total of 12 sets of dots, which is incredible. And if you need even more than 12, you can start your rotation by casting Vampiric Touch a bunch of times, and then double Shadow Crash, and boom, 20 mobs are already dotted with everything that you have. This, and if we can get Mental Decay to extend the dots, would be the perfect Shadow Priest playstyle, but I don't know if that's ever gonna happen. Bro, Elemental is fucking cooking. I don't know where to put it, dude. Farseer has been slightly improved, but I still feel like Farseer is a little bit behind. Maybe I'll put it ahead of all of the other S-tier specs. I just cannot get enough of Elemental, period, in M+. It is just a blast to play, and it's visually one of the most impressive specs in the game, period. Shaman is just eating good, and for the life of me, every time we do one of these videos, I still have to ask myself, why am I just not maining Shaman? It's just a weird thing at the moment. But Elemental is really good. It's really fun. I just hope that the Farseer is brought back to being cool and competitive with Stormbringer, and if that happens, then Elemental could actually be an S+ tier for me. Affliction Warlock. Okay, I have to put it down into C tier, I think. So here's my issues with Affliction Warlock, despite the damage existing or not existing. It's just its pure playstyle and design. All of the good things that I just said about Shadow Priest with Shadow Crash and the uptime of your dots in AoE, and I actually didn't say this for Shadow Priest, but you don't really lose uptime on your dots because you just have double the charges to cycle through, and they recharge faster, and it's much more efficient if you have downtime between packs. That is exactly not what the case for Affliction is. You still only have Vile Taint. Vile Taint only applies just so many, I think it's 8 dots and that's about it, and you only have 1 Vile Taint. And on top of that, the dots expire before your Vile Taint comes back off cooldown, and the bigger problem with that is because you could say, okay, I'll just fight without dots for about 5 seconds. Agony ranks up stacks or rakes up or ramps up stacks, whatever you want to call it, the more it ticks on the target. And if Agony drops, you lose so much more dot damage than any other dot spec, since you are counting on Agony actually ticking really hard, and that's part of the, you know, the stacking Agony system. And having to drop that feels terrible. So you have one option where you're fighting an AoE pack, because obviously this doesn't apply in raids. The raids has a different issue. But you're obviously playing an AoE. Once your dots are starting to expire, which is mostly Agony, because you can just send a Seed of Corruption and Corruption is just there anyway. You can either tap target each individual target to refresh Agony, and in 2 seconds after you do this, your Vile Taint comes back off cooldown. You either just stay on one charge, or the only charge of Vile Taint, and just look at it as like, man, if you only were 5 seconds shorter or something like that, that would be great. Or you just don't refresh your dots at all and just sit there and absolutely do nothing, or send the Vile Taint again just so that you can do the rest of the 10% of HP of the mobs that are still alive at the end of the cycle, and approach the next pack with no Vile Taint. These all are terrible choices and they all feel terribly bad to do. On top of this, Malefic Rapture sucks, Shadow Bolt kind of sucks, and Drain Soul is still pretty weak, and Dark Glare is still pretty weak. So all of these just make Affliction feel a little bit icky to play, and them taking away my Seed of Corruption spam that was so fun and orgasmic in Dragonflight is not something that I enjoy. All right, I think I'm gonna put Demonology in the same realm. I was gonna put it a little bit lower than Affliction. However, the moment-to-moment gameplay of Demonology is better, but it feels more passive, at least, than Affliction. You're summoning your demons, sure, but past that, there's no more agency over what your demons do. And I cannot help but not dislike Demonology when I have played a version of the Doomguard talent in the beta for the War Within, where you had Doomguards, first of all, do Shadow Bolt volleys in AoE, which I still think should be a talent choice node. Maybe the capstone can make it so that your Doomguard does either more single target damage or splits its Shadow Bolts into Shadow Bolt volley, considering that you already have that choice node with the Vile Fiend Charhound's rework of your dogs. I don't see why that couldn't be the case for Doomguards, and also the fact that you used to be able to spawn multiple Doomguards at a time, which I guess you can still do if you're in a high enough key, if you're geared highly enough, and you stay in combat for quite a while, which actually that might still be good, that might still be better. Destruction as the last on the list is a little bit weird. Usually I would rank Destruction higher than the other specs, but I have played it recently, and by the fact that Inferno's going away and I haven't seen anything to replace it, just puts it down a little bit. We don't seem to have anything in F tier this time around, at least not for ranged. And I feel like Destruction is just a downgrade from Season 2 in terms of overall fun. Warlock in general needs another look at when it comes to overall content. I feel like they're fine in raids. They're a decently good class in raid, but since I'm mostly Mythic Plus with the majority of the specs, I only raid with one. I have to look at it from the perspective of Mythic Plus, and it just feels like they don't really bring a lot of good stuff to a group where they can feel irreplaceable. You might not be able to replace a mage. Arcane Intellect is hard to replace, so Time Warp is not as hard to replace. You can obviously have a Shaman instead or an Evoker instead. But gates are not something that encounter designers take into consideration when it comes to Mythic Plus. Although Hailstones are nice, Soulstone as a battle res or combat res is such a long cast time for such an immobile spec that it just feels like a liability to have to cast or have to rely on your Warlock to do it. You are tanky, and that's great, but your cooldown profile or your damage profile doesn't really match Mythic Plus that well, and unless Warlock gets like a giga damage numbers, it's never going to be really good in Mythic Plus, similar to how Warrior isn't if they don't get giga big numbers. So I guess Warlocks and Warriors kind of share the same issue where their kit doesn't really complement anything amazing in M+, where people can feel like, oh my god, I'm so happy we have a Warlock. Nobody ever says that in Mythic Plus. Although in raids, it's kind of always mandatory. So this is how it looks at the moment. Once again, this is fun. This is not performance, because I know there's going to be about 17 people in the comments saying like, bro, Have you seen Beast Mastery's damage? How is it in A tier? Do you even play the game? I called it right now. Just trust me. Just read the comments. You'll see that that's there. And if you want to see the melee version of this, we posted a video last week that you can check right here and see that there are actually F tier specs in terms of fun for probably the first time since almost forever on Marcelian Online. This is a very divisive season, the one that's coming next, where it's a lot of S and a lot of bottom of the barrel.